Greetings. Hope this finds you well. So I came across this clip of an interview Cornel West had on CNN. I forget who the interviewer was, but he was being asked about why he switched from the Green Party to now running as an independent, seeking the presidency here in the belly of the beast in the United States. And he mentioned it kind of had to do with ballot access. I believe he mentioned that the Green Party was only on the ballot in 18 states. And it's kind of researching into it. Each state, has different requirements for a candidate to get into office. But this was his rationale apparently for switching to running as an independent. Some Ryan Grimm. Let's check it out.
Progressive presidential candidate Dr. Cornel West is changing lanes again in his bid for the White House. He announced today that he will no longer seek the Green Party's nomination and instead is going to run as an independent.
I think one thing too, potentially one drawback, is if he ran as a Green and then he got 5% of the votes nationally, then the Green Party would be able to get that federal funding. So it's also something I noticed. I don't think his campaign, maybe I missed it on his new platform, he wasn't calling for public funding or publicly financed elections. I think that's also super important because the corporate influence is obviously huge. Corporate power runs this country. It kind of always has. So that kind of would be one drawback. But maybe more people are likely to vote for somebody if they have an I for independent next to the name instead of being affiliated with the Green Party. Maybe that's also why it might be part of the political calculus along with this ballot access issue.
It was just, of course, a few months ago that Dr. West left a lesser-known liberal group to join the Green Party to run for that ticket. He defended his quest for the White House amid criticism.
I don't know why he would have done anything with the People's Party. That's an absolute just disaster, right?
From Democrats and many of President Biden's allies that his run could tip the election to potentially Donald Trump if he's the GOP nominee. Dr. Cornel West is back here with me. Welcome back to The Source.
Thank you. It's a blessing to be here.
Thank
and again, salute you in the work you're doing.
Thank you very much. We had you on the first week of the show. Absolutely. Tell me why you made this move and you're going to run as an independent now.
Well, I'm thoroughly
Source with Caitlin Collins.
Convinced that we're at such a low level in the history of the country with the spiritual decay and moral decadence, political paralysis, the corporate greed, suppressions, so many ways of UAW workers and now healthcare workers. We have to raise our voice.
He's talking about the Kaiser workers that voted to go on, I think, a 3-day strike this week.
In a serious way. And I'm thoroughly convinced that both parties are beyond redemption.
Yeah, he's right there for sure.
Almost like plantations. The Green Party is a progressive party, and I was so glad that Sister Jill Stein and my dear brother Jamu Baraka came in and allowed me to become a part of that process. But I discovered that lo and behold, even there are certain impediments. And you see, Sister Caitlin, I really am a jazz man in the life of the mind in the world of politics, which means that it's difficult to play in the party band. It's difficult to have to deal with those constraints.
What do you mean impediments?
The impediments having to do with first, there's a long nomination process. You got a number of different appearances you have to make. You have to make your...
And that's true. I'm not sure what the exact nomination process is for the Greens, but he technically right now, or if he was still going as a Green, he wouldn't be the nominee because that process hasn't taken place yet.
Case, and I understand that democratic process, but when it becomes so internal that I don't have time to focus on the pain and the social misery of the people.
But do you worry it complicates your bid for the White House? Because if you did run as the Green Party nominee, you're on the ballot in I think 20 or so states. Now you've got to raise a lot of money, have this effort to get your name on the ballots, which, as well as I do, it requires tens of thousands of signatures.
Well, my Green Party brothers and sisters have 18 states, so we still had 32. And the two-party system, the corporate duopoly, is just so unjust in terms of making it difficult for any independent party. And that's
right. Just like how they're not allowed on the debate stage. So you're only getting the very far right and the slightly less far right, Democrat and Republican on the debate stage. Can't have any other options, and people might start voting that way and expecting different things when they know it's, a possibility, or why so many people don't vote, because you got a turd sandwich and a shit taco. Either way, you're eating poop, right? Not good.
Shows you the way in which they want to reproduce the status quo. Now, I've got 50, but it's easier as an independent to gain access to the ballot than it is to be part of a third party.
Perhaps maybe there not as many signatures are required to get on the ballot as an independent than as a green. That's, what else it would be, right? Because it's probably like you have to pay a certain amount of money, not a crazy amount, but maybe that's why.
And so we've got folk on the ground, operations on the ground. I've got an organizational genius in my dear brother, Peter Dow, and magnificent high quality team. And we're hitting the ground running, and we're going to be in at least 35 or 40 states.
Did you hear anything from anyone in the White House or the Biden campaign or
in other states? Couldn't you also too just have write in the name on the ballot? I don't know.
Are any of President Biden's associates about this move?
No, not at all. Not at all. And we want to continue to put some fear into them, because see, when you speak to the greed of Wall Street, when you really speak to the military adventurism and the possibility of a World War III with the United States and the Russian Federation mediated with that ugly, ugly suffering of our precious Ukrainian brothers and sisters, when you really speak to the mass incarceration, the plight of those in the hoods and barrios and the reservations, poor white folk, poor working people across the board, that puts fear in the status quo. Both Democrats and Republicans are both of them tied to Wall Street.
Mm-hmm.
I don't
tied to Wall Street, 100%.
No, because we got to keep in mind, again, things are in such flux, my dear sister. Biden might not even be the candidate. He's running out of gas. Trump may be either in jail or on the way to jail. We don't know. We got a whole year. I have to be true to my calling, and I have to be consistent. And most importantly, I want to try to be an example. As fallible as I am, I want to be an example of a quest for integrity, honesty, and decency in a moment where there's so much hatred and greed and revenge.
Given you want to be that example, and you just mentioned what you said is the potential for World War III.
Yes.
You and I have talked about this before with Russia and NATO the last time you were here. You recently were headlining an event that was put on by an anti-war.
Oh God. They're trying to smear him about that Mother Jones article by David Corn. As he points out, Mother Jones would be very upset the stuff the Mother Jones magazine is doing in their name.
Group. But Mother Jones is saying that at that event that it was co-sponsored by activists who are known to have worked for Russian state media, for the Chinese Communist Party, the North Korean regime. I mean, how do you justify being on stage? With
Mother Jones, what a great figure she was. She'd be critical of what's being done in her name. It was sponsored primarily by magnificent brothers and sisters named Code Pink, Medea Benjamin, and others who've been critical of oppression across the board.
The camp was there, obviously Cornel.
It could be oppression in Russia. It could be oppression of Muslims in China. What we were calling for is a stoppage of the war because we don't want another.
I don't know, when he says oppression of Muslims in China, is there actually any evidence of that? That's not State Department propaganda or, very dubious and fabricated sources like Adrian Zen's. I haven't come across any. Maybe it's happening, but I haven't seen the evidence for that.
Endless war like Afghanistan and Vietnam. We don't want billions and billions being spent when we don't have money for health care, jobs with a living wage, decent housing, quality education. It's part of the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr., right? The bombs dropped overseas, land in poor and working class communities here because we don't have resources. That was the spirit of that gathering that we had.
You've said that you're against funding to Ukraine, and you've said that you've blamed NATO for Russia's invasion, which of course, U.S. officials.
Yes, I did a video a couple days ago. The UN Secretary or NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg literally said that Russia told them, if you don't keep pushing NATO expansion, if you remove some of the weaponry that's surrounding us, we won't invade. NATO wanted war. The U.S. wanted war. They thought it would weaken Russia and they could topple that government and colonize it for themselves. Obviously, hasn't happened.
Officials say that is Kremlin propaganda, Kremlin talking points. You haven't said yet what terms of a ceasefire.
Of course, they're going to say that. They're not going to actually address the actual issues of
or
it.
you would accept.
But I don't blame NATO. I blame the United States using NATO as part of their
Using Ukraine as what was that U.S. politician? Was it Lindsey Graham or somebody else, willing to fight to the last dead Ukrainian, basically, right? Which is really, really sick and disgusting, but what's happening.
imperial policy to provoke Russia.
But Russia provoked Russia. Russia didn't invade a NATO.
Russia, I mean, this is, of course, that's what the CNN host Caitlin Collins is going to say. Russia provoked Russia. Let's not actually look at the concrete conditions or the Maidan coup in 2014 that overthrew the government there because they wanted neutrality, and how tens of thousands of people in eastern Ukraine, the Donbass, the ethnically Russian people, have been being killed by these far-right groups with the support of the Ukrainian government or NATO expansion, even though after the fall of the USSR, the U.S. government said NATO wouldn't expand. Let's not talk about any of that stuff. Russia provoked Russia. Let's see.
NATO country, they invaded
Russia's an
Ukraine.
empire. It's wounded. It's a small empire. It's repressive.
I wouldn't consider Russia an empire.
Putin himself, of course,
small.
authoritarian. Well, it's small. The economy is roughly the size of Italy. I mean, it's
It's
small
one of the
compared to the United
biggest
States.
militaries. I mean, they're not that effective, clearly. But
No, Russia's got
That effective. Well, how effective is NATO and Ukraine with all the support from the U.S. Like, I don't know. So it's kind of interesting.
what 30 military units around the world. We got 800 around the world. There's no comparison in
a
that
strike
regard.
like what you saw
But
today
my
doesn't
point is
change
this,
your
though.
mind?
My point is this: we have to be consistent in our critiques of.
Oh yeah, the host wasn't concerned about the U.S.'s 800 military bases abroad, but Cornel West said Russia had 30, and that's the alarming number there.
Oppression wherever.
Again, we don't have control over where Russia has military bases in. Living in the belly of the beast here in the U.S., we have control over those 800 military bases. She wants to, scale back the empire. That would help.
Whatever it is. If it's Russian oppression, we're critical of it. It could be oppression in Iran, vis-a-vis our precious young Muslim sisters. It could be oppression in Guatemala. It could be oppression in Uganda. We have to be consistent, but we have to take U.S. responsibility. And U.S. responsibility is what? Special operation units over 150 countries, 800 military units in over 85
I'm just
countries.
speaking about
That's
Ukraine
world.
specifically.
No, but NATO,
Obviously.
NATO was a particular expression of U.S. power, and it has been from the very beginning.
Of course, the host isn't going to admit that, because if they had a critical outlook of U.S. imperialism, NATO, proxy war in Ukraine, they probably wouldn't be sitting in that host seat, right?
So that doesn't in any way justify the criminal invasion of Putin, but it means when you provoke any nation. I mean, if Russia had missiles in Mexico and
Yes, 100%.
Canada, what would be the responsibility of the Democrats and Republicans?
I know you've said this
Blow
before.
it to smithereens.
How much the U.S. freaked out when Russia, or I should say the USSR at the time, stationed those missiles in Cuba, and right?
Smithereens.
And yeah, so
We would blow it to
We
smithereens.
disagree on this.
That's how empires behave.
Did not provoke that invasion. That was
Yeah, but I mean,
didn't provoke it at all. Goddamn.
we got deep disagreements on that, but that's right.
We
But
do,
somebody's
but it's a
right and wrong. I'm not a
conversation.
relativist about this.
It's a conversation that we appreciate you having, Will.
Yeah.
Well, kudos to at least CNN having Cornel on so he could speak about why, changing from running as a green to as an independent, and kudos to Cornel for speaking some truth about the proxy war in Ukraine and U.S. foreign policy in general. Let me know what you think down below. Peace, much love, all part of the people.